in and then in chapter 15, I want someone to read from 1 to 10. Sorry, 1 to
9.
1 to 11, and then someone to read from 12 to the end. So who wants to read? The very first, George. That's my guy. That's my guy. George, you will read from verse 1 to 12. Who wants to read 13 to the end?
No.
Marilyn, 13 to the end. Chapter 14, verse 1 to 11. So 14, sorry. Chapter 15, verse 1 to 11.
That looks easier.
Susan will do 1 to 11 and then 12 to the end. Did I see your hand, Marilyn?
Yeah, I'll do 12 to the
You'll
end.
do 12, you'll do from verse 12 to 11. Good. All right, let's start.
In the days of Araphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of Goim, made war on Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Skinab, king of Admah, Shemeber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor. All the latter kings joined forces in the valley of Siddim, that is the Salt Sea. For 12 years they had been subject to Chedorlaomer, but in the 13th year they rebelled. In the 14th year, Chedorlaomer and the kings allied with him came and defeated the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Carmon, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emin in Shavet Kirikatham, and the Horites in the hill country of Seir, as far as El Paran, close by the wilderness. They then turned back and came to En-Misfat, that is Kadesh, and they subdued the whole country, both of the Amalekites and of the Amorites, who dwelt in Hazanot Tamar. Thereupon the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, marched out, and in the valley of Siddim they went into battle against them, against Chedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of Goim, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. Now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, they fell into these, while the rest fled to the mountains. The victors seized all the possessions and food supplies of Sodom and Gomorrah, and then went their way, taking with them Abram's nephew Lot, who had been living in Sodom, as well as his possessions.
One who had escaped came and reported this to Abram the Hebrew. Now Abram was living near the great trees of Mamre, the Amorite, a brother of Eshel, and Abner, all of whom were allied with Abram. When Abram heard that his relative had been taken captive, he called out the 318 trained men born in his household and went in pursuit as far as Dan. During the night, Abram divided his men to attack them, and he routed them, pursuing them as far as Hobath, north of Damascus. He recovered all of the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions, together with the women and the other people. After Abram returned from defeating Chedorlaomer, the king allied with him, and the kings allied with him. The king of Sodom came out to meet him in the valley of Shavah, that is the king's valley. When Mezakedar, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was a priest of God Most High, and he blessed Abram, saying, Blessed be Abram by God Most High, creator of the heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who delivered your enemies into your hand. Then Abram gave him a tenth of everything. The king of Sodom said to Abram, Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself. But Abram said to the king of Sodom, I have raised my hand to the Lord God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, and I have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, so that you will never be able to say, I made Abram rich. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who were with me, to Aner, Eshel, and Mamre. Let them have their share.
Okay.
Hmm.
Go ahead. Chapter 15.
After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus. And Abram said, You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir. Then the word of the Lord came to him. This man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir. He took him outside and said, Look up at the sky and count the stars, if indeed you can count them. Then he said to him, So your offspring shall be. Abram believed the Lord, and he credited it to him as righteousness. He also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of Chaldeans to give you this land and take possession of it. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know what I will gain possession of it? So the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, and a ram, each 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. Abram brought all of these to him and cut them into and arranged them in halves opposite each other. The birds, however, he did not cut in half. The birds of prey came down in the carcass, but Abram drove them away.
Thank you. Marilyn.
Okay, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell upon Abram, and a deep and terrifying darkness descended upon him. Then the Lord said to Abram, Know this for certain, that your offspring shall be aliens in a land that is not theirs, and shall be slaves there, and they shall be oppressed for 400 years. But I will bring judgment on the nation that they serve, and afterwards they shall come out with great possessions. As for yourself, you shall go to your ancestors in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they shall come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet complete. When the sun had gone down and it was dark, a smoking firepot and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, To your descendants I give this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kenizzites, the Chemonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, and the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites.
Great. Thank you all very much. And George, you needed to be applauded. Good
Yes.
for you, buddy. Good for you. Now, you will see in this chapter 14 that a war ensued between 4 kings and another 5 kings. We do not know why there was this war, or I should say we are a bit uncertain as to why there was this war. Yes, in that time, there could have been plots and these kinds of things, but we are not sure as to why these four kings who are seen as the kings of Mesopotamia and against the five kings of the southern Canaan, of which um, Sodom and Gomorrah um, um, is a part. And remember, that's where Lot lived. Um, we're just not sure why they had the war in the first place. Um, excuse me, but we do see that this fighting took place between these a total of 9 kings, and in those days kings used to own the cities. So where you see all of these cities that they're mentioned, these guys more or less had control and owned them and all kinds of good stuff. Um, one of the things that we could factor in here is, was it a war in which, I won't say that God caused to happen, but was God doing something here in terms of Lot? Because as you can see, when we get to verse 11 of chapter 14, you hear about Lot, about the four kings, which is the four Mesopotamian kings. They took over or seized all the goods of that were in Sodom and Gomorrah and all their food. And then they went away. But for some reason, we are not hearing that they took people. That is not to say that they could not have, but what we are hearing mostly is that they also carried off Abraham's nephew Lot and his possessions, since he was living in Sodom, and it tells you here that obviously um, 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 Lot had grown to be a pretty rich and wealthy man in the area. He was probably well known as well, and one of the leaders in the city, and therefore we hear that he is mentioned. Um, it also could note the mentioning of Lot here could also be going back to when we read in chapter, I think it was chapter 13, where you know there was that when Abraham approached Lot and said to him, that there's no need to have quarreling between you and me, or between our herders, and Abram offers him whichever part of the land. He showed him the land. Do you tell me which side of the land you want, and I will go to the next side of the land. And so having this here could also be the possibility to show you that here is it. Lot took the best. We know that Lot took the best part of the land, and in taking the best part of the land, now it is more or less like if he's without it. He's been captured. His possessions have been taken from him, and it could be God's way of saying, it doesn't pay to be so greedy. Because we could tell from Lot's greed that he wanted the best of everything, and what does it do is that it leads him into an area that is pretty much against God, that is pretty much against um, um, an area that is pretty much sinful, and so it sends the message to us as well that when you want the best of everything, and you have this desire to have things and to have success, that it could end up being a situation where um, you're not free anymore because he was captured, and therefore had lost his freedom and this whole enjoyment. So, as I said, I'm not sure if what is the meaning of the war, but it could have that theological meaning, where here Lot found himself in the best part of the land, and a war developed, and he ended up being captured and losing his possessions. And then I'm coming to you, Susan. Yes, and then who is the one that will save him is the same uncle who will send in get together with 300 trained men in his household to help recapture Lot and to allow him to be free again. So it is almost like, you know, it doesn't pay to be greedy. It really does not pay to be greedy, and that is a very much of a theological response to all of this when it comes to Lot. Yes, Susan.
Well, I lost track of the kings, I think, but it said at the end
Don't
that
worry about them. They're
the
not that
four,
important.
the four kings they all worked together. At the end, the four kings seized all of Sodom and Gomorrah, so they joined forces somehow. That
It was the four kings from the very beginning. Those were the four kings of the Mesopotamia area that were fighting against the kings from the southern Canaan area. And
okay, that's what I
therefore,
said. I got
right, the other five kings was from the southern Canaan area.
and
And
they
so the four kings who were together, they were always together. It wasn't that they become together afterwards. They were always seen as the Mesopotamia kings, and obviously were in consultation with
okay,
each
and the
other.
other kings disappeared or were
Well, the kings got defeated, and so not that they well, I mean, they not that they necessarily stopped being kings, not that, but they were defeated. Yes, they were
okay.
defeated.
Okay, like I
Yes.
said, I got lost in the kings.
Oh yeah, there were too many of them. Yes, Bryce.
I'm sorry I'm a little bit late. I
That's all
had my
right.
dinner and then I had to clean up my do my dishes and everything. You
Mhm.
said about the kings and everything. Is that how was Lot kidnapped anyway? I mean, how was he kidnapped? How he was kidnapped by these kings and everything?
Man, it wasn't that he was kidnapped, he was captured.
So
It
he was
doesn't go,
captured, you're saying?
yes, it doesn't go into detail as to how he was captured. But obviously, as I said, he must have been a very wealthy man in the area,
Right.
a known man, and it would have been a prize to catch him or to get him. Um, and as I said, it doesn't mean that there weren't other people, although there's no mention of other people being captured. Their things were stolen, were taken, but not that there were other people were captured. But there's more so like it would be more likely that others were captured. Maybe not all of them, but at least some of them. But Lot is mentioned because of who he is. He's Abram's nephew.
Yeah, that's all I
Yes,
wanted to know. So he is
yeah,
Abram's nephew, you're saying.
yes, he's Abram's nephew.
And what chapter are we on? Because I missed chapter 14.
Chapter 14.
Oh, so we are on chapter 14 still.
Yes,
We
we
haven't
are.
even started 15 yet or 16 yet.
No, we are going to do 14 and 15 today.
Okay, great.
Yeah. And you see, and the reason why I also say that you'll find that there were probably other people who may have been captured, because in the very next verse of verse 13, you read, a man who had escaped came and reported this to Abram, the Hebrew. Wait, I let you spoke, right, Susan? You had Yes, I did. Okay. Right. A man who had escaped came and reported to Abram that Lot had been captured. And so you see here that Abram takes his after hearing that that Lot was captured, he called out his 318, and they were specific to name a number. I don't know why, but 318 trained men that were born into his household, and they went in pursuit of recapturing Lot. And you will find here that is so you see another kind of a war taking place here now too, where Abram divided his men to attack them and pursue them as far as Hobah, and he recovered all the goods and brought back his relative Lot and his possessions together with the women and other people. So obviously there you see that there are other people who were captured. Um, um, and then after Abram defeated the king of Sodom, he would no, sorry. After he defeated the king of Elam, Kedorlaomer, and the other kings, the other three kings, you will find that the king of Sodom, where Lot is from, came out to meet him in the valley of Shaveh, which is the king's valley. And then and the king of the king of and then the king of Salem, and you know the word Salem really means also peace, and and sometimes it can also stand for Jerusalem as well, to mean Jerusalem. But the king of Salem, who was a man named Melchizedek, and Melchizedek is one who we hear about. He is a king, but he's also a priest as well. So you know that he was very much
Wasn't he also mentioned in Paul's letter to the Hebrews?
He is in the New Testament as well, and he's in other places in the Old Testament as well. And
Really?
yes, I mean, obviously he didn't live from the beginning of Genesis to to the New Testament. That he didn't do, but he was seen as a God-fearing man. Wait, hold on. I don't know that. You hold on, Bryce. But he was a priest of the most of God, and actually the name Melchizedek means king of righteousness. Whereas King of Salem is peace. So you see this, and Melchizedek, for example, is also seen as this kind of biblical person, or symbol that will come even in the time you will realize, or hear of him during the time of Jesus as well and afterwards. So he's a big deal, but you will see that he comes out and he blesses Abram, and after blessing Abram gives him a tenth of everything. And so one asked this morning, why was the 10th chosen? And I know one time, and to be honest with you, no one really know why a 10th is chosen. There was this whole notion, as the tithe, it was this whole notion. I remember that, maybe because some scholars think because you could count on you had your 10 fingers, and that's where it came from. But there's no real understanding as to why they came up with the 10th as a tithe. But one thing about the 10th is it is not synonymous to God or to Judaism, because pagans used to also give a tenth of whatever they have to their own pagan gods as well. So that was also happening. So here you see Abram gives a tenth of everything that he has, and the king of Sodom said to Abram, "Give me the people and keep the goods for yourself." So so here you can see that Melchizedek is not Melchizedek, sorry, the king of Sodom is asking back for the people that would have been taken from them. And he doesn't really want anything. No, sorry, he doesn't want the goods. He wants Abram to keep the goods. Whereas Abram is saying to him, no, I'm not going to keep the goods. I'm not going to accept nothing belonging to you, not even a thread, he said, or a scrap of a sandal, so that you would never be able to say, I made you, that you made me rich. And so you see, Abram is saying, I do not want any of your possessions, because you cannot say that you made me rich. So Abram does not accept anything but his own people and what belongs to them. And basically that is how chapter 14 ends. And as I said, it tends to connote that the major crux in this was the whole notion of Lot being captured and also being freed. So, any questions?
Nope. That's about cap.
And I mean, and for me, I mean, you can probably go, right, if you want me to send you some notes on each king, or you can go
No.
and Google them and find out about them. But it is not that interesting. You don't need to know. I mean, as I always say, it's not necessary for salvation.
No, you did a good job pronouncing.
Huh?
You did a good job pronouncing that name, though. So
Yeah, they're not. It is not necessary for salvation. Not necessary.
thank you. Okay.
Well, knowing all those names and being able to pronounce them is not going to get you to heaven. I can assure you that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The only
okay.
other thing I wanted to, one of the things about Melchizedek, I will go back to Melchizedek, is that you will probably hear in the New Testament, we talk about the order of Melchizedek, and that is the order in which priests are supposed to be from that order. So I mean, I will just mention that, but Melchizedek was very much a God-fearing person in the Bible, and he's very much mentioned in that kind of way. I don't think there's anything else I want to mention.
No.
Let me see if there's anything else. I don't think there's anything else I want to mention on Melchizedek. All right. No questions on chapter 14?
No.
If not, let's go to chapter 15.
I'll start reading.
No, we did it already. We already read it, Bryce. I'm sorry.
Oh, we already did it.
Yes. Now, in chapter 15, it's where you will see God makes another covenant. This time he's making it with Abram. He made a covenant with Noah. He made a covenant with Abram and with Adam. Now he's making a covenant with Abraham. And you will realize that the Lord comes to Abram in a vision. So here, Abram is going to receive a vision, and in that vision will also be the God's promise to him of a son. So we read, after this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward. But Abram said, Sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless? And this, you can tell, is something that is on Abram's mind. He is frustrated about not having kids. He doesn't have an heir of his own. And he goes on to say, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus. And Eliezer was his most trusted servant. He was probably something like his administrator in his household. And therefore, he was very close to him. He was like a son. Or Eliezer could probably most likely would have been the eldest of the servants as well, because in those days the eldest servant, if you didn't have any children, the eldest servant will become the heir of your estate. um, so and no doubt Abram loved Eliezer. I'm sure he did. But he would have preferred to have his own person, his own son, who can carry on his line. And so, yes, Pam.
Why wouldn't Lot be the heir as his
And I was
closest
going to come to
relative?
that. I was going to come to that to say that when you look around, Lot is not even mentioned. But you have to remember, Lot is not a member of his household. Lot has his own household. So it wasn't to say like how we can cross over and that kind of thing. Like if, for example, let's say now, if you don't have kids, you may be giving it to maybe a family member. But in this case, you don't see, and I'm not sure if there's a reason why Lot is not mentioned, but what we have here is he's not mentioned as an heir at all. Let me see something here. I mean, it is a good question but I think the custom would have been, as I said, that if you had a household and you had no children, it was normally the eldest servant that became the heir. So it seems to me that there were no like Lot has his own household. He could come over and become the heir of Abram's own and his as well, for some reason. And if I remember, I will check to see if I could find any other information on that. But it appears that household stayed within household, and if there were no children, then the next person will be the eldest servant, and you go down the line. Hence the reason why Eliezer was seen as the one who will inherit it. And so you realize in verse 3 that Abraham said, "You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir." And then the Lord came to him and said, "The man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir." And he took him outside and said, "Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them, then he said to you, so shall your offspring be." So here we have a promise from God that Abram will have his own flesh and blood as an heir. He will get a son, and that Eliezer will not have to be his heir. And and that this heir that he gets is going to multiply, and there are going to be lots of people, and it's going to be like a nation, and he doesn't have to worry about that at all. And you will find then that in verse 6, it is interesting, because in verse 6 it tells us that Abram believed the Lord, and he credited to him as righteousness. So here, Abram believed what God was saying, that he will get a son. Now, someone said to me this morning, but he didn't. He still went and strayed, and I was like, Well, that is true, because his wife Sarai, after no doubt he was frustrated and realized he wasn't getting a son, and that Eliezer would have become the heir. She probably, one person said, she probably nagged him to go and lie with the servant lady, her servant, which became who produces Ishmael, who we will
Oh,
hear
come
about
on,
in the next chapter.
blame it on the wife. Come on.
Well, when we get to it, you may see that it is blamed on the wife.
Yeah, because a
Of
man
course
wrote
it
it.
is. Who do you
Sa-
think
Of course
wrote
it
it?
Because a
Who do
man
you
wrote
think
it.
wrote it? The men wrote it. Oh my goodness.
Sarah, Sarah, we will read about that next. Yes, George.
It's the inspired word of God,
Yeah,
whether you like it or not.
George.
And you may believe that, but I may not.
Now, you see, George, if it was a man doing this, if a man had done it to the woman, it would have been all right. You see?
Laugh, laugh,
Ah,
laugh.
but as we see here, he did stray eventually, and that tells us about the humanity about our humanity, that God doesn't want perfection. God knows that we will never be perfect, but God wants us still to be able to live our lives in a way that there is a great level of faithfulness to Him. And that's what Abraham did. Abraham lived his life as faithfully. Yes, sir. Susan, you got to go?
I
Oh.
do. That's why I want to ask this question. What did all the killings of all these animals have to do? Was that just a sacrifice to get him to have
Yes,
children?
the sacrificing would have been a way of thanking God for His promise. That is what it is. Sacrifices were normally sacrifices were usually given in terms of also Thanksgiving.
Okay, and then the birds
Mhm.
flew away, so that was significant of why did the
Mhm.
birds get to go away? I guess he said the birds flew away. He let them go. So I guess that didn't mean much.
Um,
He said the birds of
that's the
prey came
birds of
down.
prey that came down the carcass, you mean?
Oh no, birds of prey.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes,
So they were
yes, yes, yes.
vultures. Okay, got
Yes.
that. Yes,
Mhm.
and I do have to go, but I'll see you next week.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
See you next
Okay.
week. Have a good
Thanks.
night.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
You too.
Bye-bye. So yes, so you see here that God promises Abraham a son, and he believed. At this point in time, he believed it would happen. And so it also shows you that this is what God expects of us in the same way He expected back then. And then in verse 7, he also said to him, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land, to take possession of it, which is Canaan, which is Israel. But Abraham said, Sovereign Lord, how can I know that I will gain possession of it? And so the Lord said to him, Bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, 3 years old, along with a dove and a young pigeon. And if you remember, sometimes these animals, you see here that these animals were part of the animals that were identified for sacrifice when it came to giving thanks to God, and the animals also represent both the rich and the poor, because doves, and pigeons, if you remember, when Mary and Joseph went to the temple, they took the two doves or two pigeons as offering of a sacrifice to Jesus. So and if you could bring a heifer, that means that you probably was a very rich person. And so you see here that the Lord asks for these various items, and Abram will bring all of them, and he cuts the heifer and the goat and the ram in halves, but he did not cut the birds in half. And you know, it is again, there's no guarantee, there's no certainty as to why he cut those birds in half. Maybe some believe that it's because by not cutting them in half was more or less to show that God was honoring the covenant that he was making. Not to mention that, I mean, you can imagine putting a heifer on the altar without cutting it. It would not have been a really pleasant sight or smell. But yes, but it is believed that the reason for not splitting the birds is because that it may signify God's mercy toward the covenant that he was making. Also, yes, Pam.
Is I'm sorry, I'm probably running at about 50% of my
No, that's fine.
capabilities, but I don't remember. I remember earlier in Genesis they were only eating fish and vegetables.
Correct.
Are they now eating meat, or
Well, making this sacrifice, you don't eat it.
well, the priests did, right?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Oh,
The
all right.
sacrifice was only to God. That was what it
Okay.
was. It was a sacrifice as a means of a thanksgiving to God. As far as I know, at this time, there was no eating involved. Eating meat does not come in, I think, till maybe what? Is it chapter 19 or something of
I don't know.
Genesis? It comes later in Genesis. Let me see. Hold on. Or have we passed it already? Let me see. Hold on a minute. But sacrifices wasn't about, it was more or less about offering to God. I don't remember it being, oh gosh, where was it that meat started to be eaten? I don't remember when meat started to be eaten. I knew, and I can't remember now. Anyone remember when meat started to be eaten in Genesis?
According to Google, it was after the flood.
It was after the flood, yes. But did it say when after the flood? Oh, wait, if it was after the flood, then it had to be. I know
God
it was after
granted
the
permission
flood.
to Noah and his family to eat meat, saying,
What
every moving thing that lives shall be food for you.
chapter was that?
Genesis 9, number 3.
9. I said 19, but it was 9. Okay. Because yes, what verse?
3.
Everything that lives and moves about will be food for you. Right. Okay. I knew it was after the flood, but I was wondering if it was, I said 19, but it was 9 that it was. Okay. Right. But as I was saying, well, so yes, they were eating meat then, but I am not so sure. I'm trying to think if when sacrifices were done on the altar, if persons partake of them afterwards. That I cannot remember.
Google says, if we believe Google, right? Burnt offerings were meant to be consumed completely by the fire.
Yes,
The
that's what I
priests
thought.
did eat other types of offerings, such as sin or guilt offerings, or parts of the meat from other sacrifices that were not completely burned.
Mhm. Yeah, but yes, I didn't even remember that part of it. You see that part because it felt to me that the sacrifice that was offered, really offered to God, where it was burnt till it was burnt.
Right, that's what it says.
Right. Yes, that is my feeling. You didn't eat those. You did not eat those. But I didn't even remember that the priests used to eat the sin offerings. Oh. No wonder they had so many sins. But yeah, so I was writing that. Yes, they did not. These were not eaten. These were like Thanksgiving offerings. In this case, this is like a Thanksgiving offering that the Lord is giving. That is saying to him, "You're going to take possession of the land." And so, and Abraham wanted to know how he's going to gain it, and makes an offering as a means of saying that yes, you will gain it. Um, eventually. And look at this, and remember, this is all a vision that is happening to Abraham, and he is, and God is showing him what the future is going to be like for him, because not only does God tells him that you're going to get the land, he then comes round at verse 12. And he says, and it says, as the sun was setting, Abraham fell into a deep sleep, and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, so this is almost like a dream now. The Lord said to him, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own, and that they will be enslaved and mistreated there. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. What are he talking about? What God is talking about?
Exodus.
Egypt,
Egypt and
Exodus.
Exodus. Egypt and Exodus. So here is it. God is already revealing to Abraham what is going to happen. He's revealing Egypt and Exodus to them. And then God goes on to say in verse 15, you, however, will go to your ancestors in peace and be buried at a good old age. So in other words, you don't need to worry about this. You won't be around to have to worry about this. But it at least tells him what is going to happen. So he knows they're going to get the land. They're going to be out of the land for 400 years, which it was when they spent in Egypt, and then they will come back to the land again. And so you see here what we will read about Moses and Joshua are all tied into here. And then in verse 16, in the fourth generation, your descendants will come back here, for the sins of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. And when the sun had set and darkness had fallen, a smoking firepot with a blazing torch appeared and passed between the pieces. On that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abraham, and that torch fire passing between the pieces is to show the covenant that is part of the way how the covenant was being made. And that was like a confirmation. Is God's way of giving a sign, confirming with the smoking pot that I'm confirming my covenant with you, Abraham. So that's what that really, verse 17 is, just a confirmation of the covenant. And then in verse 18, on that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram and said, to your descendants, I give this land from the Wadi of Egypt to the great river, the Euphrates, to the land of Kenites and Kenizzites and Commodites and Hittites and Perizzites and Rathites, Amorites, Canaanites, Girgasites, and Jebusites. And so you see that where you see the confirmation that the Lord has made a covenant with Abraham. Up to now, he's still called Abram. He's not called Abraham yet, but he's still called Abram. But God makes a covenant with him, and he's saying that I'm giving all this land to your descendants. Any questions?
I have a question.
Mm-hmm. Yes, Beth.
I had a professor in college. I took a
Mhm.
Bible class, and he was saying, and he didn't really answer this, and I don't know if I'm sure there's been papers written on it, that kind of, I guess, kind of like Lot, if the land that God was giving Abram was not, fertile, green, wonderful land. I mean, it was like a
That is
desert,
true.
rocky, and
That is
so
true.
So I guess why, I mean, I mean, surely, people have talked about that over the years. What is their speculation of why Abram was given this land as opposed to something? I mean, my professor said something like Egypt. Egypt was, very, beautiful, green and
Mhm.
fertile, and just, I mean, I guess, what has been the discussion or speculation over time of why this land?
Well, the first thing you have to recognize, especially if you read back in chapter 13, there was a nice part of the land as well, and there was the bad, if you want to call it the bad part of the land. If you read chapter 13, you will realize that there was the beginnings of quarreling and tension between Lot's people and Lot and Abraham's people, not to mention there were other people living on the land as well. And one of the things that Abraham decided to do, he did not want the quarreling, he did not want the fighting, he did not want the tension between him and his nephew. And so he said to his nephew one day, listen, this is all the land here. And he showed him all the land. And he said, you could take whichever part you want. If you take that part down there, I will take this part up here. If you take this part up here, I will take this part down there. And Lot took what was the better part of the land.
Right. I mean, I know the story. I mean, we talked
Yes.
about the story. I
And-
guess is that, I mean, kind of like what you were saying, is that just a way to reflect, I mean, because you said earlier, reflect Abram's character,
Correct.
and that he
Correct.
gave Lot the choice, and Lot was the one. So it was a blessing for Abram, even though the good character was what resulted in a blessing, even though on the surface it was, if God's going to give him a land, why doesn't he give him the good stuff? You know what I mean? I mean, that's the first time
Understand
I've
that.
heard
I
it.
understand. I understand that. But
Mhm.
the theology of that is that you are correct. It shows you the character of the man. It
Mhm.
shows you and what it does also show you that it isn't all about the land. Although they were talking about the land, it is not all about the land. It is about your character. And how he can say to Lot, you take what you want, I will take the rest. He allowed Lot to have the first no the first choice. Mind you, it also shows that even although Lot took the better part of the land, he still ended up losing it.
Mhm.
And actually the better part of the land was where it was also the most sinful part of the land, because that's where Sodom and Gomorrah was. So but I think when we look at the theological aspect of it, it is that it shows a person who is willing to who has such a character that he allows that individual to choose what he wants. And it's the same theology as I said to the folks last week. It's a real good way for us as well when we have this, because I've seen it in many cases where there's this sibling rivalry after parents have died and everybody wants the land, and nobody is willing to do what Abram did. They all want the best part, and therefore it teaches us as well that this is the way to go, because you may take the best, but you may still lose it. It may still, because you were greedy, you still don't have it. And that's what happened to Lot. He lost it, and his same uncle had to go back and recapture him. And then he still lost it again when Sodom and Gomorrah went up in flames. He still lost it again. So I think that is the real crux of the matter here, that it is more to do with the individual's character. Always remember, and you saw it in Jesus when it comes to the Gospels. They're not interested in the outer appearance. They're interested in the heart, and that's where that's what God is about. What is happening in here? What are you thinking? That is where they're more impressed with. And so it was Abraham's heart that God is impressed with. That is my whole belief. Sometimes, things you have to read in the Bible as well, that certain things happen, which is the same way today. Certain things happen, not necessarily that the event or whatever has happened is really the important. It's the lesson that is learned from it that is more important. If you get what I'm saying here.
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes, Marilyn.
When you get to Leviticus details all of the offerings, the sin
Mhm.
offering, the guilt offering, the
The offerings,
offering of
yes.
purification and so forth.
Yeah.
And if
All the
somebody's
priestly-
really interested,
all
they
the
should go
priestly
read
stuff.
Leviticus.
Yes, all the priestly stuff. I think it also tells you, I read Leviticus in a while, even how many times you should put incense into the pot to do this. Oh my gosh. So, but do you understand me though, Beth, what I'm trying to say here?
Oh, yeah.
That it is, I really do believe that it is not as much of the land, although the land is important, because look at it. If the land was now, if you really think about it, if the land was the primary focus, you know how many times they lost that land? You know how many times? And it wasn't, and the losing of the land, and it was not that they just lost the land. It was because of their character, their disobedience of God, that caused them to lose the land.
Mhm.
So it tells you, and God told them when they got there, if you're faithful to me, you will be blessed. If you're not, you will be cursed. And therefore, that's where it comes from. And so, they were captured, and they were in Syria. They one another time they were in exile in Babylon. Another time they were in exile in Persia. It was like a revolving door. As I always kept saying, they will have the land, then they're disobedient to God, and then God will send a superpower to capture them. They lost the land. And then after they lose the land and they're in exile, they will start getting back good again and obedient to God. And he will send another superpower to get them out of captivity, and they go back home to the land until they become disobedient again. And they go back, and it went round and around in a circle. And that's what happened to the Old Testament people. It is about being faithful to God. And being faithful to God is not outward, it's inward.
Mhm.
It's inward. It comes from within.
Mhm.
And when they did not do that, they lost it. They lost it. So yes, and that's why I said too, even the same way with chapter 14, we're not really told why there was a war and why we have all these names of kings and places that we cannot call. But that is not. In this chapter, I don't think that is the focus. That is the focus is to show Lot as one, he's greedy. He was greedy. He took the best, and he still lost it. He was still captured. And then he gets it back because Abraham saves him. But then you can get lower down into Sodom and Gomorrah, and he loses it again. And it stems from the outset of his greediness. He preferred the uncle, the old man, to get the worst piece of the land, which is which he had, and he took the best piece. And then what? So it's a lesson for us as well today. It's really a lesson for us as well. That all that, I heard my mother always say, and I guess you have heard it here, all that glitters is not gold. My mother always said that. All that glitters is not gold, because it glittered for a lot, but it was one of the most sinful parts of the glitter. So, any other questions? Everybody gone to sleep? All right, next week we will read chapters 16 and 17. We will read those two chapters for next week, and we will study them. I now realize that Sodom and Gomorrah is chapter 18, so you can see that we're getting close, and chapter 19 is when it gets destroyed. So we're getting close to that point where he gets the land in chapter 13, and by chapter 19 he's lost it. And the book got 50 chapters. So always remember that. Always remember that. Have a good night, everyone. See you. God bless. Bye.
Bye. God be with you and also with you. Let us pray. I'll have to read over 14 and 15 again, although. Good night. I'll read over 14 and 15 myself anyway.